technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the weekend edition here on Point of View, and as always, we're going to be covering a lot of issues, although front and center, we're going to be talking about this case before the Supreme Court, which we mentioned earlier in the week. You'll also have a chance to hear just a short clip from that, and then we'll get into explaining what that might mean. We're going to get into some other issues, what's going on in the campaign. As we talked about yesterday, that campaign has already begun. We already have, I think we found out yesterday, 12 different special elections between now and the first primary. So even before you have the first primary, we're already in the election season. So we'll talk about some of that as well. Lots of issues on the table. First of all, Kelly Shackelford, President and CEO, Chief Counsel for First Liberty Institute, and Erin Smith, Associate Counsel. So it's great to have you both here. I brought in my copy of the First Liberty Insider. This is something you want to get a hold of. And you will see that our first article, Kelly, obviously, has to do with the evangelist and the Supreme Court. Silenced evangelist takes his case to the Supreme Court. That happened Wednesday. In just a minute, we'll get a chance to hear some of the oral arguments. But you were there. What was going on?
Well, it's a really important case for a few reasons. Number one, the case that we hope to eventually get to is you essentially have a large park with a huge amphitheater, and you have people going out there in these big festivals to share their faith. And the city decided they didn't like that. So they created a zone that's like 10 by 10. It's like a little box in the corner of the park. And that's where you can engage in free speech. And I just think that is so unconstitutional, right? But the problem is we haven't been able to get to the issue because when Gabe was first arrested, put in handcuffs, think of this, a citizen put in handcuffs for speaking outside the 10-foot box. I mean, this sounds like some bizarre horror movie.
I know.
And so he pays the fine, $300, and says, look, I'll just pay the fine, move on down the road, and I'm just going to file a lawsuit so that in the future I won't be arrested and handcuffed. And what they did is they said, well, the federal, and let me lay the background for this. Federal judges, and I'm sorry to say this, but they're human beings. They would love to avoid controversial cases. So I think this is shameless as a federal judge, but so they come up with all kinds of techniques to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I just can't hear your case. And this is one of those. They said, well, there's this old case called Heck versus Humphrey that what it says is that if you're convicted of a crime and you're put in prison under state law, you can't then come back into federal law and file a lawsuit to try to overturn that. Well, newsflash, Gabe isn't in prison. Okay. So this really shouldn't apply, but they applied it. And so what this was about was it wanted to make sure, we have a federal law, civil rights law called 1983, so that citizens, even in states which are not friendly to their federal rights, think about Alabama for African Americans, this law was passed really focused a lot on race, and that there are certain states that would not protect your federal rights, right? But this law is now used to bring all your federal constitutional rights. So it's there so you can go into federal court. But what they did in this old case, what they didn't want to use that to try to undo criminal convictions that had nothing to do with any of that. Well, this isn't like that. This is Gabe didn't file a lawsuit and say, hey, I want to undo what happened to me. I want to undo my fine. I want to undo, he didn't do any of that. He said, I am coming back and I want to make sure that my First Amendment rights are protected.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't have to go to jail and be handcuffed in order to figure that out. That's why we have this law. And so that is the issue that was before the Supreme Court is if somebody's been convicted even of something really minor like not speaking in the right area, can they come back and bring a lawsuit to try to make sure that they won't be arrested in the future? And I mean, my quick summary is I think the court is going to rule our way.
Yes.
I just think they have to figure out how to do it in a way where they don't open the floodgates to every criminal bringing a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And I think there's ways to do that, like I just described, but that's what happened in the court.
You know, some of you might want to know, what does it sound like when you're in the court? So I thought we'd just play a minute of Allison Ho.
His religious speech. A Heartland Section 1983 claim to seek prospective relief, protecting him from future prosecution under the ordinance. That pre-enforcement Section 1983 claim isn't predicated on a past unlawful conviction, and this court shouldn't extend heck to bar it. As this court recognized nearly 50 years ago in Woolley, when a genuine threat of prosecution exists, a litigant is entitled to resort to a federal forum to seek redress for an alleged deprivation of federal rights. Neither the habeas statutes nor Heck and its progeny bar Olivier's claims. The relief he seeks, an injunction and a declaration, won't annul his conviction or alter his sentence. His claims for future relief are, as this court explained in Dotson, distant from the core of habeas, safeguarded by Heck. The Fifth Circuit alone deprives a person of access to a federal forum to vindicate federal rights solely because he was previously convicted under the law he challenges. But a prior conviction shouldn't forever bar a claim for future protection.
Erin, let me come to you because in some respects that's what we're talking about. If you are then found guilty of this, you should be able to find what's called relief in the future, and you can hear Allison Ho making that case. It just doesn't seem fair to an average person, whether you're a lawyer or not.
No, I mean, and they spent, the justices spent a long time, you know, a lot of different justices mentioned, well, what if it's one of Gabe's friends that brings the lawsuit?
Yes,
what then?
go.
And then the answer is that's fine, but it's just not fine if Gabe brings the lawsuit.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that left a lot of the justices kind of scratching their heads, and a lot of us in the audience scratching our heads, and anyone listening going, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And then they said, well, what if it's 20 years in the future?
Yes.
The city of Brandon said, still not okay. Even if it's so far in the future. And so I enjoyed that clip, though, because there's no questions being asked, and that's part of the gauntlet is getting interrupted.
I was going to play some of the questions, but I figured, first of all, let me just say that if you have never had a chance to listen to a Supreme Court case, I think Coach Kennedy's was more interesting than this one, but still, it's kind of interesting to see the back and forth and to hear Clarence Thomas say something. Actually, that was pretty interesting because that was one right off the bat. You can go to our website, or you can just go to firstliberty.org/Olivier or whatever, and you can see, first of all, the First Liberty Live. You can actually listen to that. We just pulled that short clip out of there. But I thought, interesting enough, I mentioned First Liberty Insider, why judges don't like religious liberty cases. So that's something you've written about here. So we need to take a break, and I want to get into more of the details because, if nothing else, I just didn't expect the founders to say, yes, you have free speech, but only in a 10 by 10 square. So we can need to get back into that right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Gary Bauer wrote a column with the provocative title, Jesus Wasn't a Socialist. He explained there is growing effort by political forces on the left to convince Christians that socialism and its father, Marxism, are closely aligned with the teachings of Jesus. Nothing could be further from the truth. He reminds us that Marxism is about much more than economics. I discovered that in graduate school while reading a signed text written by Marx, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao. Marxism is a worldview that affects every area of life. For example, Socialist parties and left-wing parties across Western Europe and here in the U.S. are radically pro-abortion. The Democratic Party in the United States is the home of most socialists and is totally devoted to abortion on demand for any reason. He adds that socialist movements here and across Western Europe are also fully committed to LGBTQ ideology. Socialist Democrats promote that ideology in the schools, and he also warns that socialists and Marxists believe that the state should have authority over children, not parents. At its core, Marxism is atheistic. That is one reason why religious liberty also suffers under socialist and left-wing governments. As one of my regular radio guests explains, the state must be supreme according to Marxists. They cannot allow citizens to believe that God, the church, or the family are more important than the state. Gary Bauer concludes by noting, nowhere in the Gospels does Christ advocate for big government to take money and assets from one group of people and give it to another group. We are to be generous and give to the poor, but that does not justify building a large government bureaucracy. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, it is our weekend edition, and a little bit later, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Talking about an evangelist, but in just a minute, we're going to try to explain that it covers a lot more than those of you that would like to share your faith in a public arena. But I thought, Erin, for just a minute, I said as we went to the break, I don't envision the founders and the framers of the Constitution thinking, well, we're going to give you free speech and freedom of religion as long as it's within a 10 by 10 square. But that's sort of what the particular city has said, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Kerby. I don't think that the framers were sitting around at the convention saying, when is speech appropriate? Probably 800 yards roughly away from where the people are that they're trying to speak to. It should probably be a space big enough for 6 people, maybe one soapbox, and then that's where people will have free speech. No, I don't think that's what the framers envisioned at all. Our nation was founded on this idea that ideas should be shared, and that's how we discover truth. And so yeah, no, I fully agree with you. That was not their object at all.
Yeah, this is an embarrassment. And what's really sad is another person who was going to that place filed a lawsuit, and the Federal Court of Appeals actually it was more in an emergency posture or whatever, but they said, well, it sounds kind of reasonable to us if the city said that there was some, maybe safety dangers because there's some traffic nearby that, it sounds like it's okay to us. And you're like, again, sometimes judges aren't exactly doing their job properly.
Right.
And so I'm really hopeful. First I would point out this case, just like the case argued the day before us, is such an unusual case because, for instance, when ADF did their case the day before us, ACLU filed a brief on their side.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it tells you that they realize, this is dangerous. What the power they're trying to give the government in that case, to force them to tell the government who their donors are so they can reach out to them, right? That's going to hurt everybody on both sides, right? That's exactly here. This is the right of anybody to engage in First Amendment speech and to even have their right to a day in court. And so immediately the liberals in the court were somewhat with us because they knew what would happen to their folks that they cared about. And so it's both of those cases are cases that could literally go 9-0. And it's because it's not about the substantive right. It's about the ability, the power you're giving the government. In this case, to keep citizens from even being able to come into federal court and saying, hey, I need to defend my First Amendment right. So it's a really significant case, way beyond just Gabe and way beyond even just religious liberty. It's free speech. Everybody who has those violations need to get into court or they can't do anything about any of it.
Well, and again, it reminds me of some of the conversations we've had with you and some of the other staff about pregnancy resource centers, about abortion clinics, about buffer zones, and a variety of other issues. So somebody might be listening right now and say, well, I'm not an evangelist, although I guess maybe I should be going out there and sharing my faith. So this doesn't affect me. It could affect a whole lot of listeners.
Absolutely. It affects everybody who wants to exercise their First Amendment rights, which I think is everybody in the country. But certainly at the very core of every person of faith, is the ability to share what they believe. And if you can be, sequestered to a box, as Erin said, 800 yards away from the facility where everybody is showing up.
Isn't that amazing?
Then that's not free speech. That's not the First Amendment. But, it's the new trick is, well, I'm just so sorry, but, it might be a good claim, but you can't come to court. And so that's what we're arguing about here. And the court will come down with a decision within, by June at the latest. I think it'll be sooner than that, although I think there'll be some disagreements maybe about where to draw the line on who can bring lawsuits. But I think Gabe is clearly within that line. Mm-hmm. And then if they do that and we do win, which I would ask everybody to pray,
yes.
The court was in. Just the 9 justices went into a room by themselves. Nobody went. No note taker, no nothing. And they voted. And they are starting to write that opinion today. And they will then trade ideas and opinions back and forth. People can change their mind. So I would just encourage people to pray until the decision comes out. Because I think it'll be really significant for everybody's right to have their day in court under the First Amendment.
Might just quote you. You were saying the stakes in this case couldn't be any higher. This involves more than your right to share your convictions with others. It involves everyone's constitutional right to have their day in court. So
that's right.
There's not just the religious liberty, free speech issue. This is everybody should have a day in court. And I was struck the other day, Erin, Kelly, and I were going back and forth about this particular article. It was in the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal and others are simply saying it just doesn't make any sense that if you, plead guilty, then want to prevent this from being an issue later on, you can't have that access. And we always assumed that there was some level of common sense in the courts. But this is one time where it's kind of a head scratcher for some of us.
That's right. Yeah. And I think Kelly really hit the nail on the head when he said, judges, they're human. And they don't want to sometimes they just don't want to make a hard decision or wade into something that they think is controversial. And so in this case, the judge, decided this was an easier path. This was the easiest path, was just to say, we're not even going to talk about this issue. You can't come to court. And so the fact that we can bring our claims to court is part of what makes America so special. We don't suffer from this massively corrupt judiciary like other countries do, where you can't bring your claim to court unless you pay the judge the right amount of money, or the right person, or your family is connected enough. And so that's really what this is about. This is about access to justice in America for all Americans.
That's why we talk about some of the resources. We have one link there where you can obviously see the First Liberty Live. There's a piece also where you get to hear from the evangelist himself. Yeah. And then you said something I have not seen, but there's apparently a 3-minute video which gives you a drone shot and helps you understand exactly what kind of idiocy was part of this particular city decision, right?
Yeah, there's a great video. It's on Gabe Olivier and our case. And it lets you see, why does Gabe do this? What is he doing? The answer is Gabe came to faith because somebody witnessed to him on the street.
I was reading about that.
And so he feels a responsibility from the Lord to do the same with others. And that's what he's trying to do. And so and it'll show you the visual with the drone of the area, and you'll see how ridiculous this is. But it's really good. I would really encourage people to look at that video. If they go to firstliberty.org and just look under Gabe's case, I'm sure it's there.
Yeah.
The other way is if people are not getting our email on Friday, I cannot encourage that enough. Every Friday, we take the 5-6 biggest things in the country on religious liberty, and we do a story on those, and we'll have just a couple of sentences on each one, and you can hit the link to go more in depth on that issue. But otherwise, you're not going to know what's happening. I mean, you probably didn't even hear that Gabe Olivier was at the Supreme Court, right? You wouldn't even know. So it's called The Insider.
Right.
And if you sign up, we have like, I don't know, 750,000 people that get that. They don't, it's no charge. We don't give out anybody's info, but it's a way for people to get the information. And especially, the Christian stations all over the country that Point of View is on, I just encourage them because, number one, they need to be praying for these people, right? When they know about a Gabe Olivier, this is something you can pray about that will affect your kids, your grandkids. But number two, the stories that really the Lord moves on you about that you want to share with your friends, I think that's really important because the more people see people standing up, the more people see people winning, which is over 90% of our cases, the more bold they're going to be to do what God is calling them to do. So it's a way you can be helpful, not only in prayer, but with those by sharing information that will help them understand that they have a lot more freedom than they might realize.
And you made a good point just in passing. A lot of people would not know about these two religious liberty cases unless they listen to Point of View.
That's right.
So, and of course, you would listen to that as well. And if you're having some difficulty trying to sort that out, you've got a great interview with Jordan Lawrence and another lawyer there talking about the connection to the civil rights issue. And so you can learn as much as you want to. You don't have to go to law school. You can just simply click on the right buttons there on First Liberty and First Liberty Live. Let's take a break, though. There's another case before the Supreme Court I thought we might talk about. It relates to the separation of powers, and I thought that would be one that we could get into since I've got two lawyers around the table to speak to that. And then, as I've been alerting you all week, I think it's about time to talk about Candace Owens and also Turning Point and the Charlie Kirk Show. And since Kelly has met with some of those people, knows them personally, I thought it would be a good time to talk about that. All that coming up right after this.
At Point of View, we believe there is power in prayer, and that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, it is our weekend edition, and if you'd like to join us, let's open up the phones. 1-800-351-1212. We've been talking about free speech. We've been talking about religious liberty. I thought just for another couple of minutes, we might also get into this piece about the separation of powers. And on the one hand, I think you can recognize that I put together little booklets on the deep state and the concern that sometimes these independent agencies are just a little too independent when it comes to that. But on the other hand, what about the power of the president to begin to remove an individual? And before the court is a case of whether or not Donald Trump can remove a member of the Federal Trade Commission. And if you're a student of history, you might say, I think we've heard this before. Franklin Delano Roosevelt wanted to remove or change the FTC or the Federal Trade Commission. And so, Kelly, I thought we'd come to that for just a minute because it's a good illustration of what the founders intended, keeping the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch separate. But at the same time, we have something that has been created really since the early part of the 20th century, and even some of that back in the 19th century, which is really different than what the framers intended.
Yeah, there's, I don't know if, I know you remember, I don't know how many listeners remember, but back when Trump just came into office the second term, there was all these lawsuits being filed against him for what he was trying to do. And you had a lot of these lower court. I say a lot. It's really not a lot. It's maybe 5 or 6. They went to the same 5 or 6 more liberal federal district court judges, and they were all getting overturned here and there. But they felt, the left felt really excited because there's lawsuits. They're doing something to Trump, even though he was just elected. They just wanted to stop him. And I said, I just want you to go play it back. I said, I think they're making a big mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they are so bloodthirsty for Trump that there are a number of laws and legal decisions that actually are protective of what they want that they're putting at danger. I mentioned civil service reforms, that you can't fire like a federal employee unless you go through like 10 years of paperwork and all this stuff.
There you go.
Whereas, what does the Constitution say about the executive power, Article 2 power?
Yes.
It specifically says, go read your Constitution, all power is vested in the President of the United States,
there you go,
in the executive branch. So the president should be able to hire and fire whoever they want to. They have all power, not Congress, not anybody else. So I thought you're putting all those civil service laws at risk by these lawsuits on behalf of them. And the other thing I mentioned was a case called Humphrey's Executor.
There you go.
Which is a case that said, well, I know usually the executive gets to have control over the executive branch, but if we think this one is like kind of a quasi-legislative type thing and it's kind of independent, and I was like, we've got people, even like, you'd consider not a flamethrower, you'd consider more of a moderate conservative, like Brett Kavanaugh. Well, he's going to be real strong on what the Constitution says about the power of the executive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I think they're going to rue the day they did all these. And I think it's now about to happen because the case is about to reach the Supreme Court, which we knew originally they would do. And I think we're going to see power restored. I'm not saying I like it totally. Okay, let's say the president could just fire the entire, communications commission, right?
FCC,
yeah. And all of a sudden, so let's say you have a really crazy left-wing president, and they just want to shut down the airs, and put a bunch of people on there that are going to pass all these rules. Point of View has had to worry about a number of these crazy things they were trying to pass. Mm-hmm. So there's some danger to having it jerk real quickly one way or the other. But it's not a matter of what we want, is what does the Constitution say? What does Article 2 say? And I think you're going to see Humphrey's Executor and some of these things that are going to be really pulled back, if not completely overruled.
I might just mention, too, it's called Humphrey Executor because he died, and so it was the executive group, the family that brought that suit. But I'd love to get your comments, Erin, because you're a little closer to having maybe taken some classes in jurisprudence and constitutional interpretation, because, again, even the most recent booklet I have is on the road to serfdom, and that's because I recognize a lot of people will never read Friedrich Hayek. They probably think that it's Selma Hayek's father or something like that. But I noticed the other day John Stossel was suggesting books for Christmas, and that was the first book he mentioned. Mm-hmm. And so I think that what Hayek was representing is when you put people in there and they really are shielded, bureaucrats love to control other people's lives. And if there's no accountability, that is the case. So the piece I pointed out is one that thinks this is really dangerous. I think this is what we need if we are concerned about a deep state. But your thoughts?
That's right. Yeah. That was kind of, if you, for some of my constitutional law classes, some of our assigned readings were the Federalist Papers.
Yes.
I think that those are some fantastic writings that, you don't have to be a genius to read the Federalist Papers. These were written for Americans to read when they were talking about the Constitution and passing the Constitution. So I would highly recommend any of the listeners, if you want to go pick up the Federalist Papers to go learn about the background of what was going on at the time the Constitution was being ratified, it's a great place to start. And that accountability is the name of the game in this sense, right? That's what they were imagining. This unitary executive, this one head of the executive branch is in control of the executive branch. And that's how the American people can hold the executive branch accountable, is by saying this one person is in charge. And then every 4 years, we get to decide if we like what that person is doing or if we don't. And if we don't like them, we can replace them. And so that's where that accountability comes from. But if the voters can replace a president, but then nothing gets fixed, there is no accountability, and that's really where the problem is.
And that gets us back to Article 2, doesn't it? Because in a sense, you can at least hold the president responsible, but if you have individuals that have these independent agencies, these three-letter agencies, we like to call them, and whether it's the SEC or the FTC or the FCC or on and on and on, these are, quote, so independent that even if there's a crisis and we need the president to react quickly, as we would expect a commander-in-chief, we're talking about that next probably as well, you don't have that ability because they're just all sorts of bureaucrats that are making decisions completely independent of both the Congress and the presidency. Is that fair?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the executive, we have three branches of government. And the executive branch, the president is the head of that and is supposed to have control of that. And again, the 2 points that I mentioned earlier are, I think, the two tops, which is things like Humphrey's executor, which limit, this is an independent agency, so the president can't fire people there. There's that. But the other one is civil service laws. Those are passed, Congress passes the law, the president signs the law, but Congress can't tell the executive branch what to do when the hiring and firing of their own employees. And so I just think that's going to go down eventually. But whether it will right now, but I thought it was really foolish to bring all those lawsuits. But we're now seeing all the things where these people were so gleeful that the judge from Boston or the judge from New York or Bozeman or, these guys that they love, that they were issuing injunctions against the president. There are appellate courts, and it goes up, and then it goes up again, and now you're at the Supreme Court, and now you're creating precedent, and all these things that you had going your way are now up for grabs. I just didn't think that was very smart, and I think we're going to see the result of that soon.
Yeah, and again, if you elect the president because you say, we want you to build the wall, but then you spend all your time preventing him from building the wall, or you said, I want you to deal with the drug issue, and so he begins to remove some of these Coke boats from the Caribbean, then you would expect the president to do that. And so when every time you turn around, there is either a judicial action, or this last week here, a Washington Post article, which even the New York Times finally criticized. You're in a bad way when the New York Times is criticizing and checking your fact checking. You can see why I think some people are saying, why can't the president do more? Because he is a little bit hamstrung, isn't he?
He is. Now, again, this president has done extraordinary things to kind of try to force these issues, which makes some people uncomfortable, right? I mean, you think of all the people that they have tried to get out of these federal seats. What has been true for many, many, many years is these people come in and then they embed themselves in these positions.
Yes. And
it doesn't matter who is president; they're really ruling the country. And well, when you tell them, "Hey, we're just going to fire all of you," some of them start leaving voluntarily, and then they offered them a sweet deal if they would. That makes a big difference in the future with having all these embedded bureaucrats controlling our lives.
If you want to learn a little bit more, our latest booklet is the one on the road to serfdom, and of course a previous one on the deep state. Let's take a break. Be right back.
This is the second story I have been pleased to tell in recent weeks in which a school district backed down from violating the First Amendment religious freedom of students and parents. In this case, First Liberty Institute had to sue California's Encinitas Union School District in federal court. Perhaps school officials in this beach community didn't understand or simply chose to ignore the United States Supreme Court's June 2024 ruling in Mahmoud v. Taylor. First Liberty's CEO, Kelly Shackelford, explains that according to that decision, parents cannot be denied the right to receive notice and opt out from any teaching that substantially interferes with their religious beliefs. The ruling gives clear guidance for what happened in Encinitas. Kayla Toney, Counsel for First Liberty, says, "We represent two Christian families whose fifth graders were forced to teach their kindergarten buddies about gender ideology using a book called My Shadow is Pink." The story's main character is a boy who sees his shadow as pink. According to the book, the pink shadow reveals your innermost you. So the boy wears a dress to school. His father decides this is okay and puts a dress on too. A teacher at La Costa Heights Elementary read the book aloud to fifth graders. As part of the school's mentoring program, fifth grade students were assigned to watch a video of the reading with their kindergarten buddy. Then, the fifth graders were supposed to ask their kindergartner what color shadow represents them and to draw the shadow with chalk. Parents of some fifth graders had a problem with their 10 and 11-year-olds being required to tell little kids to question their own gender identity. The parents asked to be notified of future similar teaching and given the right to opt out. A district court ruled for the parents. The next step was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, but the district voluntarily withdrew their appeal. It looks like they saw the writing on the wall. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, it is our weekend edition. If you'd like to join us, I suspect this will probably generate some phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. Kelly Shackelford, Erin Smith in studio, and our third article is one that comes from the Daily Caller. I could have posted any of these. You might remember a couple weeks ago, Dr. Merrill Matthews went into some detail in an article that appeared in The Hill about Candace Owens. More recently, I've posted a piece by Rich Lowry, Candace Owens and Conspiracy. This one is entitled Charlie Kirk Show Breaks Silence to Address Candace Owens' Conspiracy Theories. And I know many of you probably have some thoughts about this, so I thought we would get into it. But Kelly, I wanted to wait till Friday to talk about this because I know you and Karen have actually been out to Turning Point USA, and you know some of those individuals quite well.
Yeah, we know all of them well, really, the leaders. Charlie was a friend for many years, and we probably talked every week, either via text or in person, and just horrible what happened. And you know, which is part of why it just breaks my heart to see this happening. I mean, especially because of what this is doing with Charlie's wife. I mean, you're not even through the trial of your husband, and you've got these wild accusations, none of them based on evidence, and I mean that's just really hurtful to her. And then of course, then you're accusing people that are, you know, his closest friends of, you know, killing him or assisting killing him. Again, based on no evidence. It's just really irresponsible, and it's evil.
Yes. And
you're like, why? I don't. You know, you can't know people's motivations, but obviously, this has evidently been very successful with, you know, increasing, you know, people, you know, podcast followers and all this kind of thing, but at what cost? And so it's really sad. And if you're Turning Point, then do you just if you respond to all these crazy, salacious, again, non-fact-based allegations, then all you do is give them more airtime, right? And you focus on them. Plus, they don't want to start speaking when the trial hasn't started. I mean, they could actually say something that could hurt, you know, the prosecution, you know, just by accident on something, just because of the way something is said. So it's just it has to be a really difficult time. But at the same time, our approach has always been at First Liberty that you do respond to lies, and that you do take care of those things, or else there are people who will just it'll get worse and worse and worse. Yeah. And so I don't know that this is the right way to do it, what they're doing, but I pray it will be. It will certainly be interesting if Candace shows up and actually tries to defend some of these ridiculous statements, and hopefully we can put an end to this. And I just wish there were more people who wouldn't be so easily led astray. I mean, come on. It's just some of this stuff is so ridiculous. But people, there really is a spirit kind of in our country right now to believe every crazy conspiracy brought up. And again, they don't think about whether there's evidence for these alleged conspiracies. They just go with it. And here's what's really sort of odd. It's really, really like critical theory.
Yes.
I mean, because critical theory, critical race theory, everything that the left and socialism and Marxism, this is their whole philosophy. There's an oppressed and an oppressor. And the people with the power, they're the oppressors. And there's always a conspiracy that they are doing this and that and whatever. So if you're not really destitute and poor, then you're actually doing something really evil. And so it just leads to revolution and all these horrible. It's division. It's straight from the pit of hell. Yeah. Not based on truth, not based on evidence, but based upon this whole philosophy of just assuming conspiracy by anybody who looks like they're a little better off than you are.
The producer of the Charlie Kirk Show is Blake Neff, and he explained why for a while they did not respond, because they said, first, we thought that any prevarications were so absurd that no one would believe them, when we found out that's not the case. And the second reason we've said so little up until now is the good rule of thumb, which Charlie Kirk followed, and that is don't feed the trolls. But when you've, as he said here, made claims of financial impropriety, suggested that people were actually behind a murder of Charlie Kirk, I guess you have to speak out. And back to your point, you would think some people would eventually let the conspiracy go, but I saw something the other day with one of the individuals that walked on the moon, who has actually been on the program with us, actually went on a panel with an individual that denied that we were actually on the moon. So, I mean, it shows you to the level which we need to go to. And Erin, you're smiling, so I'd love to get your thoughts about this, because sometimes it's almost like the younger generation, not you, or not even necessarily your peers, but some are just buying into these conspiracies because of the nature of social media.
Yeah, absolutely. I think social media drives a lot of this. It's clickbait. It's trying to get people to follow you or listen to you or discuss. And there's all sorts of, we could go into algorithms and those sorts of things that are going on in the background that people really don't think about. They're really not thinking about how these companies are driving you to certain websites or forcing certain content to you that's suggested because of something that you clicked on, or maybe you didn't click on it, but someone mentioned it to you and your phone's listening to you, so it knows that was in conversation earlier. There's all sorts of things like that. But I think this really just goes back to this basic principle in media generally: if it bleeds, it leads. And then that being, people like drama, and they like watching. There's some sinful part of our human nature that enjoys watching other people suffer that we view as our enemies. And so that really just goes back to, this is interesting. It's intriguing to people, this puzzle, this conspiracy. It gives them something to think about. Maybe they're too bored. Maybe they should go pick up a book and read for once. But we have a duty to investigate. And these claims, like Kelly mentioned, are not supported by fact or evidence or any truth. And so as Christians, it's our responsibility to call that out and say, where's the truth? Like, show us the evidence, and then we can have a conversation. But until then, this is just pointless to sit and spin our wheels about.
I just mentioned that the January issue of Outlook is about revival, and we even talk about the possibility of a Charlie Kirk effect. So even while we're talking about the negative, there's some really positive elements of that as well. But if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, because I thought, Kelly, it would be worth pointing out that, as you have said, it is really important for any institution, whether it's First Liberty Institute or in this case, whether it's Turning Point, to address that. And by the time you have comments about financial impropriety at a time when you have outside third-party evaluators and when you have suggestions that people have been actually behind the scenes involved in his murder, I think it's time to speak out. So there is going to be, of course, a broadcast that will be available, and we'll talk about that when it comes out. But that's just a topic that I thought we should at least bring to the table, especially since Kelly knows some of those individuals only so well. So let's take a break. If you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. When we come back, we have a lot more to cover. And if you would like to join us, we'd love to hear from you. If you would like to find some of the articles we've posted, they are on the website today. And of course, we have a link to First Liberty Institute. And we will, by the time we're done, also have a chance to talk about the commentary by Penna Dexter, which relates to some things involved with First Liberty. Let's take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Who can you trust? Years ago, many of us could probably have provided a fairly long list, but today it seems we almost can't trust anyone. Educators don't even know what a woman is anymore. Many so-called public servants have shown all they care about is themselves. The FBI has been accused of bias, law-breaking, betrayal, and journalism. It's largely corrupt, with no Clark Kent standing up for truth, justice, and the American way. All of this is why Point of View Radio is more important than ever, and your part in supporting us is more needed than ever. Do your part today in supporting trustworthy truth. Stand with us and help push back the lies and the darkness. Visit pointofview.net. Don't put it off. Take a moment right now and click on that big blue button that says Donate Now, or call to invest at 1-800-347-5151, pointofview.net, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second article today, if you would like to join with us, second hour, we're going to spend some time with focusing on one of these articles having to do with the Democratic two-pronged strategy. It's a piece by Ben Shapiro, but I thought before we get to that, a couple things. Last night, we think we found the J-6 bomber, and talk about conspiracies. All sorts of things have been said about that. But also, this gets back to the courts. I was surprised to see the Supreme Court said, you know, if the state of Texas wants to gerrymander, it is free to do so. And I've always had the philosophy we should do it every 10 years, but if some states are going to do it, why don't let other states do it? So the state of Texas is allowed to redraw some of these congressional districts.
Yeah, it's a big decision. I predicted it. Literally was just asked even yesterday by somebody who was running for office, what do you think is going to happen with the lines? And I said, they're going to be upheld. The lines are going to be upheld. I mean, the decision below was somewhat shocking because the Supreme Court has tried to deal with this whole issue of they don't want to be in the line drawing business, right? And if they were going to say, oh, we're going to oversee your line drawing if we think things are benefiting one party or the other, I mean, that's all they're going to do. and so they basically, have ruled now, this is not just in this case, but in the past, they've said, if you're doing it to help your party, okay. If you're doing it to like put one race in a, then that's unconstitutional. And what happened here is, they did it clearly for partisan purposes. They were trying to pick up more Republican seats, just like the Democrats in California are in the process of this. They're trying to pick up Democrat seats. And while I don't think anybody in the country likes where we are, I mean, you wish there was a more neutral way to have lines picked. It's where we are. And there's nothing unconstitutional about drawing lines in a way to support, your side over the other side. You just can't do it on the basis of race or these type of bases. And so there was 150. The shocking thing about the Texas decision is it was written by a Trump appointed judge, a guy who's considered fairly conservative, although when we saw him go through, we said, well, he doesn't have a really record of being real strong on certainly social issues or things like this, which usually means they're not necessarily very brave or whatever, right? And so they can tend to drift. And he wrote the opinion, and I think it was wrong, but there was 150-page virulent, really strong dissent from one of the more respected long-term federal court of appeals judges in the country. And when I saw that, I went, I don't think this is going to go very well at the Supreme Court. And sure enough, they said this was really a bad error, not only because it was wrong on the law, but because they did it right next to an election, which really kind of, they said, endangers having the courts interfering in election results. Yes. Shouldn't have happened.
And Erin, I might just bring that up. The reason they use the word race is we have the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which looks like the courts even reevaluating itself. And so if you say you're doing it because of race, then that would make it unconstitutional. If you're doing it for any other reason, probably constitutional, because the courts really don't want to tell states how to organize their particular jurisdictions, and the state's actually responsible for the elections. And I think most people don't realize that's still one very important aspect of federalism, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, it's absolutely an important aspect of federalism that the states get to say, like, here are our rules. If you want to, we're going to have voter ID rules in Texas, and we're going to have them, in these places. Here's how we're going to count. Here's when you're allowed to vote. Here are the places you're allowed to go to vote. And it's questions like that or drawing congressional districts that the Supreme Court they're not going to come in and say, okay, in Texas, we're going to do it this way, and in Oklahoma, we're going to do it this way, and in California, we're going to do it this way, because like Kelly said, they would never stop doing that. And really, federalism it gets to the heart of, these are the jobs of the federal government, and here are the jobs of the state government. This is the closest government to the people that live there. And so it's important that the people that live there can vote and control how the place that they live is operated. And then that goes right to their voting, too.
And I do think that there's another case that the court has, and it involves what you were referring to, the Voting Rights Act. And what has happened in the past, for the purpose of making up for past discrimination,
right,
they have allowed the drawing of lines based on race to help minority races. I predict that's about to fall.
I think so too.
And when it does,
and it should.
It should. You shouldn't be drawing any lines based on race. But when it does, going to the partisan side, this will be very harmful to Democrats because a number of lines have been drawn based on race. They were using that as a way to get Democrat Congress. So you're going to see a number of seats if that occurs. Shortly thereafter, you're going to see, I've seen a large number of seats, definitely over 10, that will flip from Democrat to Republican. So that case is, I just want people to know, that case is at the Supreme Court as well.
That's another one.
And it's expected that they're finally through with all the race-drawn lines.
And Erin, I was just thinking that the justification for that back in the 60s, since I'm old enough to having lived through the 1960s, there were some times when obviously there was all sorts of segregation. There were Jim Crow laws. There were actually election requirements that were making it almost impossible for certain African Americans to vote, and on and on and on, the way they drew the districts. But we're not in the 1960s anymore, number one. Number two, it's based on this flawed assumption that only African Americans will vote for African Americans into office. And I'm thinking, I don't know, J.C. Watts in Oklahoma. I'm thinking Tim Scott in South Carolina. I'm thinking, I don't know, Barack Obama. And so some of the assumptions that went into the 1965 Voter Rights Act really aren't relevant anymore, are they?
No, we're not. We're definitely not in the 1960s, and I thank God for that. And you think they did the same thing with education too. It's not just the voting and the gerrymandering. They did the same thing in education, and talking about the courts had to discuss racial quotas and all sorts of things to try to say we need to bus students to this other school across town to make things more equal, and we think it's probably going to take roughly 25 years, and then it'll probably all be fixed. But the court in Students for Fair Admission, that Harvard case, said, we're not doing this. We're not doing anything based on race. This is not happening anymore. And I expect they'll say the same thing about gerrymandering in elections. And the line rings true. I don't remember what case it's from, but the best way to stop discriminating on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race.
Yep.
Amen.
I remember Sandra Day O'Connor saying, and I think she said this 25 years ago, eventually maybe affirmative action won't be needed in 25 years.
Right.
And so time is up. So we'll see on that particular case as well. Anyway, the next article I want to get to is, what is the Democratic strategy? Right now it seems like telling individuals in the military that they don't have to follow illegal orders. Is that a winning strategy? So we'll get talking about that and what this upcoming set of midterm elections might be meaning. And of course, we just had a special election in the 7th congressional area there in Tennessee, and Kelly's from that area of the country, so we can talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Gary Bauer wrote a column with the provocative title, "Jesus Wasn't a Socialist." He explained there is growing effort by political forces on the left to convince Christians that socialism and its father, Marxism, are closely aligned with the teachings of Jesus. Nothing could be further from the truth. He reminds us that Marxism is about much more than economics. I discovered that in graduate school while reading assigned texts written by Marx, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao. Marxism is a worldview that affects every area of life. For example, socialist parties and left-wing parties across Western Europe and here in the U.S. are radically pro-abortion. The Democratic Party in the United States is the home of most socialists and is totally devoted to abortion on demand for any reason. He adds that socialist movements here and across Western Europe are also fully committed to LGBTQ ideology. Socialist Democrats promote that ideology in the schools, and he also warns that socialists and Marxists believe that the state should have authority over children, not parents. At its core, Marxism is atheistic. That is one reason why religious liberty also suffers under socialist and left-wing governments. As one of my regular radio guests explains, the state must be supreme according to Marxists. They cannot allow citizens to believe that God, the church, or the family are more important than the state. Gary Bauer concludes by noting, nowhere in the Gospels does Christ advocate for big government to take money and assets from one group of people and give it to another group. We are to be generous and give to the poor, but that does not justify building a large government bureaucracy. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
As we mentioned yesterday, as we were talking with an individual with iVoter Guide, that this is going to be a very significant election season. And for some of you thinking, well, the first primary isn't until March. Yes, but as we pointed out, we have more than a dozen, almost 24 special elections, one of which, Kelly, you're very familiar with because it was in the state of Tennessee in the 7th Congressional District. Now, again, this was seen as having some national significance because if you could win in what was pretty much a ruby red congressional district, that might bode well for AOC, Bernie Sanders, and a variety of others. But as it turns out, that we'll now have a Congressman Van Epps in there and another, and that makes it easier for our good friend Mike Johnson because it's a pretty narrow margin that he has to work with in terms of the Congress.
Yeah, it does, and that race was scary, especially to Republicans, because it was on December 2nd, right? I mean, people went, they had Thanksgiving, right? And literally the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, they're supposed to know to vote in some little, congressional district, and so there was a great danger that people just wouldn't vote. That you'd have, one side go, ooh, we got an opportunity here because most people are not going to know to go vote. And so there was a huge, really last minute, but, last week kind of campaign by the Republican Party nationally and on TV and everywhere else to try to let people know you need to go vote. I mean, my son, for instance, my youngest lives in that district and called me that day and said, Dad, do I live in this district? So he had seen the press, and it caused him to go vote. He said he was going to go just because he was so tired of the ridiculous commercials back and forth, and he was like, I'm going to go vote, So, but
forgot your son was there. Yeah, that's good.
So they, certainly the Republican side was thrilled to get the seat, which they were supposed to win anyway. But I do think there were some signals in that were consistent with what happened in the earlier elections that should not be so encouraging to Republicans. I think it's clear that normally what happens in the midterms is the party out of power does well because people are upset, and they're more energized and they show up, and I think that's what we seem to see right now because while he won, what was it, 6% or
I think it was 9% eventually.
Yeah, 9%, but it was 20%. And not only was this
that's correct.
Not only was this a candidate who was a Democrat in a very Republican district, but this was a candidate who said she hated Nashville. She hated country music. I mean, she was pretty bad.
You cannot make this up.
You
but
can't
that's
make
true.
What is the worst campaign slogans you can come up with? Let's have her say them. And yet she lost by less than the last time. So I do think
wake-up call.
Yeah, I do think there's a wake-up call. If Trump is not on the ballot, which he won't be in the midterms, it'll be about all these other people. Do the Republicans have a strategy? And then also you've got people are still feeling inflation that Biden really caused, but that Trump hasn't solved yet, right? I mean, there have been a number of things better. Most people don't understand that the tax bill gave great relief to people who were lower income. They don't understand the benefits of those things, so they don't really feel like that's anything. So they just see it's still hard. I mean, the inflation, all those things are still set in. They got set in when Biden went on the spending spree. So I think it's really a little bit uphill for the Republicans right now, the next November. So they've got some things to figure out.
Well, if we can for a minute, Erin, just talk about the piece by Ben Shapiro, because he said the Democrats seem to have a dual strategy. One, sow doubt within the military ranks, because they're talking about this idea that you, if you're in the military, are required not to follow illegal orders. But then when you ask what the illegal orders are, well, they can't come up with that. And then they say, oh, I think Pete Hegseth was involved in one. So the coincidence there, I think, is more than a coincidence. But the second one is to position the entire bench of Democratic hopefuls as pragmatic centrists. So if you think that the phrase affordability is a winning strategy, and maybe it was in New Jersey and in Virginia with the two Democratic governors, and maybe also helpful with Zohran Mamdani as the incoming mayor in New York City, that seems to be the strategy. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, this strategy that's discussed in the article really seems to point to how do we create chaos in America? How do we confuse people? What are ways that we can manipulate the truth or spread some sort of lie that can get people to do what we want them to do? We don't need to be truthful or forthcoming, whether that's disguising candidates as moderates so that they can get elected and then pulling the mask off and revealing who the people really did elect, or sowing some sort of discord in the military, creating some sort of chaos. How can we make the military ineffective? Tell a bunch of people that they're going to be in really big trouble if they do what they're told. That's a great way to absolutely cripple the military. And we saw in our SEALs case, there are severe consequences for not following an order.
Oh, yes.
You are subject to court-martial. You can be dishonorably discharged. It ruins your legacy. It can ruin your family. You will not have a career after that. And so that's a serious thing to tell service members. If you follow an illegal order, you're going to be in trouble. But we're not going to tell you what that looks like. We're not going to tell you what those illegal orders are. But if we're in power and we find out that you did something that we're going to say was illegal at the time, now you're going to be in trouble. And so it really causes hesitancy and can create this internal chaos within our country, just to try to gain back power that they feel that they've lost, because they have lost it.
It was really irresponsible, especially for somebody like Senator Kelly, who was in the military. If you want to say so and so was an unlawful order, and I believe you shouldn't follow that order, I mean, then okay, but you better be ready to back that up. Mm-hmm. But to say it this was purely a political ploy, like a campaign ad. They were playing with something that's really important, and it was irresponsible. And so they actually, the whole blowing up the drug boats thing, and that there was a second bomb dropped when there were still a couple of people alive. That was something that the media took and made a media story to try to give some backing to this. Now, it turns out that, well, one of the guys that was still alive was on the radio to get more people to come in. And so, I think everybody looks at it now and goes, okay, well, that's totally in compliance with the laws of war. But I just think, I don't know. I think people see through these things. I think these little crass political methods, using whatever they want to belittle or not care is that important because they're just using it for political purposes. I think Americans don't like that. I think they want sincere people. Mm-hmm. They might disagree with them, but they at least want to just tell me what you're for and what you're against, and let's go with that. But they don't seem to have learned the lesson that the sort of, shift and jive, the sort of purely, obviously, transparently political stuff. I just don't think that is very effective these days, except with their really extreme base. And, they all love it. But I think that's to their own detriment when they follow that.
The theory always has been that Republicans sometimes move to the right and then in the general election move to the center, and Democrats move to the left and move to the center. But as Ben Shapiro is saying, the topics that once dominated Democratic rhetoric, transgender issues, DEI, equity, have faded from prominence. Even a party that for a while was upset about immigration, right now you're not hearing him talk about disbanding ICE or defunding the police, although we're going to get to that in just a minute with some of those. So there's a real struggle, I think, even more in the Democratic Party right now. Do we please the base, the people that tend to show up in the primaries? And if that's the case, we're going to end up with a lot of individuals like the one we just mentioned that actually said, even though I'm running in the Nashville area, I don't like Nashville, I don't like Tennessee, I don't like country music or AOC types or things like that. Or are we just going to try to see if we can hide some people for a while so they look moderate? So it will be an interesting set of elections, but I think it illustrates again the point that we make so often, just the need for discernment. I think as we get into the election season, the iVoter Guide is going to be one thing that will be your resource because it tells you what they've said on various issues, who supports them, and where their money's coming from. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
Where does moral truth come from? According to 58% of Americans, individuals determine moral truth. A quarter of Generation Z says society determines moral truth, and morality can even change over time. Only 42% of Americans believe that truth comes from God. I don't know about you, but I find these numbers extremely troubling. It really is a crisis of truth, and that crisis has consequences. Look at society. Evil is called good, good called evil. People with biblical beliefs are called bigots, or worse, they're canceled. But there is hope. The Bible promises the truth will set us free, and that's why Point of View is relentless in our commitment to the ultimate source of moral truth, God's Word. At Point of View, we know that God's truth is eternal, and if we stand together, we can help more Americans apply His truth in their daily life. Help Americans find truth again by giving at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we have in studio with us Kelly Shackelford, Erin Smith, and I mentioned before the First Liberty Insider. This one talks about First Liberty and the individuals that were clients of yours that have testified before the President's Religious Liberty Commission, and you have another one coming up on Wednesday. And since we were talking about the military, I thought we might make that a prayer target.
Yeah, the Religious Liberty Commission, for those who don't know, there's never been one before. Mm-hmm. This is the first time ever, and most commissions report to an agency or a department, and they kind of collect information. Our charter is very different. We're responsible to report directly to the President of the United States our specific recommendations on what we want him to do to advance and secure religious freedom for the future. So we are, and by the way, this is all got to be done by July 4th. So this is, short time views, right? And so it's people like, Franklin Graham and Dr. Phil and Ben Carson. And I mean, we could go on and on, great people, Bishop Barron, Archbishop. Anyway, just I could go through them all. But the thing that's interesting is the testimony is so powerful of these people who are coming to testify. I mean, they only have like 4 minutes to do their testimony, but wow. I mean, they're telling their stories and it's really powerful. So I would encourage people, if they haven't seen any of that, now they might not want to go and watch the whole hearing because it's like from Like the one coming up this Wednesday starts at 8:30 and ends at 1:30. That's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. But we, like, for instance, at firstliberty.org, we've collected some of the testimonies of our clients, and they're up there where they can watch, and they're just so good. And people are learning a lot about what's going on around the country. And you could even take one of these, like Shay in Encina's, one of our clients, little now 12-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. His was only 37 seconds, his speech. But what an incredible speech.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
And the president had called him up just out of everybody else to give that. So it's a way you could share some of this with other people. But I would encourage people, pray for the commission. Again, we've got to get those recommendations in. And my goal is to give things that are going to last. It's not going to be from one president to another, but it's going to be things that will last through many presidents. And there are ways to do that. You can ask the Justice Department to take certain actions that will create precedents. There's all kinds of things, but we just pray for wisdom and real impact in what we do, because this is an opportunity in a short window now to affect many years into the future and our kids and our grandkids.
And your chairman is Dan Patrick, who's Lieutenant Governor of the state of Texas. And I guess he and Ben Carson, technically, the ones that run that. But again, I wanted to give him credit because he's kept it going. And it's certainly it's not like he was looking for anything else to do either, but it's a great opportunity. So military this week, and we'll come back and maybe give you an update on that. But I thought for just a minute, since we have some time, we did talk the other day, Erin, about what is going on in Minnesota, and it is amazing with, and again, we don't want to say that all Somalis are engaged in that, but it's a high percentage of Somalis that were engaged in an incredible amount of graft and corruption, some of which they probably brought with their own mindset from when they left Africa. But in the midst of this, there has also been additional criticism of Representative Ilhan Omar because of some crass things she said, and now I'm noticing not only Republicans distancing from her, but even Democratic leadership. But I posted this because the other day she says, we just need, and this is back to what might happen in the particular campaigns, calling for a boycott, and a boycott of anybody that does anything that is seen as pro-Trump. So if you are working with ICE, you have to cancel your contracts. Then you start seeing all the places in which some of these companies found themselves not really wanting to get involved in the culture wars. Airbnb, for example, co-founder, did something with the president. You have Amazon's link and providing $1 million to the inaugural fund and contributing to the White House ballroom project. Target, which can't catch a break because both the left and the right and the DEI policies. And we've said this before, it'd be better if some of these companies would just stay out of the culture war, but in some cases they can't avoid it because the left just keeps coming at them, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, here's what we're learning. I mean, boycotts work. Boycotts work on companies that are willing to bend to make money. That's if they're after profit, and then that's their sole purpose is to make money and gain control and power of that specific area, then boycotts work if you have enough people. I don't know how many people are going to be joining this particular boycott. That you might not be able to go to any place at all, because maybe if you believe in the economy, you're pro-Trump. I don't know where the line is at all. That's unclear.
Yes.
But it's either stay out of the culture war, or if you're going to be in it, pick a side and stand firm. Like, let's stand firm for what we believe in. And I'm from Oklahoma, so I'm going to give a shout out to the Green family and Hobby Lobby and say, hey, if you want to run a business and run it to honor the Lord, or whatever your purpose is, stick to the purpose. Don't get afraid when the mobs come and when the people come with their pitchforks and they say, we're never going to shop here again. Okay, this is what I believe in. I'm going to stand firm. And so companies, either they should pick a side or stay out of it. And poor Target, I mean, I hesitate to feel bad for them. This is the name of the game, really. But yeah, I don't know about this boycott. I don't know how much teeth that it really has, but sure.
I brought it up for the boycott issue, first of all, and then also the Ilhan Omar, and then, of course, the Minnesota one, because that happened in a state, and wasn't the governor also a vice presidential nominee? We didn't hear much about that, did we, Kelly?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is obviously incredibly embarrassing to not only the state of Minnesota, but in particular to Tim Walz, because this was right under his leadership. And so anyway, so it's an interesting sort of, it caused Trump to say, well, we're just going to put a halt on all the immigration from these, that plus the shooting in the National Guard.
Yes.
He's like, we're tired of doing this. And I think that some people were getting to they wanted some control over immigration because it had gotten ridiculous with the Biden administration, and it was horrible what was happening to the country, and people could see it. And they wanted all the criminals out, but I don't know that everybody was sure they wanted just the people that were here illegally out. Mm-hmm. And so there was some sort of softening of the numbers, but boy, they started ramping back up when it came to the Afghan that shot the National Guard lady, and then this. And because Trump did something that I think Americans would be in favor of, which is we really shouldn't be, nobody should be allowed to come in and become a citizen in this country if they are anti-Western values. Mm-hmm. And these people that come from these countries that don't have those values, I mean, it should be the exception, not the rule, that they get to come into our country. We're not looking for people to come in our country and to set up their own little country. We're wanting them to come if they want to be Americans. And Americans is not a race. It's not a sex. American is a set of ideals. It's the Western civilization ideas. And it's not the alternatives to that. And that's where we've gotten off with our immigration is, I mean, now that you control it, we should be very specific about who is welcome to become a citizen in this country. And I think Americans are in favor of that.
And Erin, this week we did do some things where we talked about Somalia and Afghanistan. And my argument is you would hope that eventually they would have the same view about laws, morality, corruption, and even women. And in some respects, we have noticed, especially in Europe and in the UK, sometimes the worst experiences are those of women who found themselves with Muslim mindset that wasn't actually assimilating to the Western culture that they are now living in.
I mean, there's a lot of people that come out of those situations. They flee to a place like America to escape that kind of cruel, evil conduct that's happening in these other places. And then if they come to America and they experience the same thing, I mean, what was the point? Why leave the place where you were experiencing that just to come to a new place where the same things are happening? Yeah. That's not what America is about. It's this set of, hey, we are for freedom, and we are for liberty, and we are for religious freedom. But if you are going to persecute people or be evil and do vile acts, that's not the same thing as exercising your liberty. You don't get to exercise your liberty to harm other people or to kill other people. And so, yeah, I mean, it's sad that Europe's experiencing this, but I think I think some of those countries are starting to see, we got to turn this around. We got to figure out what to do.
And we don't want it to happen here.
No, we do not.
We are certainly seeing some of that with some of the individuals that came from those countries and brought those values here. Let's take a break. Penn and Dexter's commentary and some prayer targets right after this.
This is the second story I have been pleased to tell in recent weeks in which a school district backed down from violating the First Amendment religious freedom of students and parents. In this case, First Liberty Institute had to sue California's Encinitas Union School District in federal court. Perhaps school officials in this beach community didn't understand or simply chose to ignore the United States Supreme Court's June 2024 ruling in Mahmoud v. Taylor. First Liberty's CEO, Kelly Shackelford, explains that according to that decision, parents cannot be denied the right to receive notice and opt out from any teaching that substantially interferes with their religious beliefs. The ruling gives clear guidance for what happened in Encinitas. Kayla Toney, Counsel for First Liberty, says, "We represent two Christian families whose fifth graders were forced to teach their kindergarten buddies about gender ideology using a book called My Shadow is Pink. The story's main character is a boy who sees his shadow as pink, According to the book, the pink shadow reveals your innermost you. So the boy wears a dress to school. His father decides this is okay and puts a dress on too. A teacher at La Costa Heights Elementary read the book aloud to fifth graders. As part of the school's mentoring program, fifth grade students were assigned to watch a video of the reading with their kindergarten buddy. Then, the fifth graders were supposed to ask their kindergartner what color shadow represents them and to draw the shadow with chalk. Parents of some fifth graders had a problem with their 10 and 11-year-olds being required to tell little kids to question their own gender identity. The parents asked to be notified of future similar teaching and given the right to opt out. A district court ruled for the parents. The next step was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, but the district voluntarily withdrew their appeal. It looks like they saw the writing on the wall. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back just for a few more minutes, let me mention, first of all, that if you don't already receive the Viewpoints commentary, Penna Dexter's is the one we've posted right now. My commentary, by the way, is the one on Jesus wasn't a socialist, and it really was based on something we talked about a week ago where Gary Bauer had written that, and I just give him credit for writing about that. But this one on California opt-out, Kelly, I thought I'd come to you for just a minute because Penna said this is now the second story in which she's talked about a school district backing down from violating First Amendment religious freedom. But this particular case, and we have listeners out there in California, so Encinitas Union School District basically found themselves in federal court. Explain why.
Well, what they decided to do is a program that, by the way, in the program training materials told them not to tell the parents, where they ordered the 11-year-olds, the fifth grade students, to read a book called My Shadow is Pink to their kindergarten buddy, essentially forcing these little kids to push gender ideology on a kindergartner and asking them to then draw their shadow, forcing them to pick their gender. Mm-hmm. And, our client and some others said, I can't do that to my kindergarten buddy. And they went home to their parents and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm uncomfortable with this." And the parents went to the school and they said, number one, you should be notifying us if something like this is happening. Number two, we need a religious exemption for our child. And the school's response was, you have no right to notification, and we're not given religious exemptions. It's kind of like you Backford religious people just need to get with the program, is essentially. And
oh boy!
And so
that did it.
Yeah. So they then followed that by holding a Pink Out the Hate Day, so that they could bully these little kids that had different beliefs, and it's just horrible. Now the good news is I'll tell you that this is kind of funny. We file in federal district court. This is in California. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We
get the only Republican judge anywhere in the area. And he immediately recuses himself.
Oh.
We're like, what? So we get a typical, more, Democrat appointed federal judge who rules about 4 months ago that this does violate the Constitution, that parents do have a right to be notified, that kids do have a right to religious exemption. So praise the Lord for the rule of law and some judges that follow the rule of law, no matter what their partisan background. That's a victory there, right? But the cool thing is, months later, we're at the U.S. We're at near the U.S. Supreme Court. We're at the commission hearing, and it's on religious freedom in the schools, in particular with parents and students. And President Trump shows up, and there's 12 people testifying that day, and out of everybody, he calls on little Shay Encinas and says, "Shay, why don't you come up and tell your story?" And it's so cool. You have to see the visual of this. They literally, he's standing behind the presidential podium. It's like his eyes would be all you would see, but they bring this stool around and they get him up all on this stool, and then the president pulls the mic way down and he gets up and gives the most, incredible 30-second speech testifying to the Lord and his religious freedom. It was like he's a 55-year-old professional speaker. And it's so good. It's so powerful. And it reminds you why we're fighting for these freedoms. It's for your kids and your grandkids like little Shay and Cena's. So it's pretty powerful. I would encourage people if they haven't seen that. If you go to our website at firstliberty.org and go down a little bit, you can see that. Marisol Castro's testimony was powerful too. But the commission is a great thing to not only help people understand what's going on, but also, I mean, I'm telling you, I live in this arena, right? But everybody else on the commission, they don't live in this. I mean, Dr. Phil is not seeing this stuff every day, right?
But they're just overwhelmed.
They can't believe what they're seeing. And it's witness after witness after witness after witness. And so I'm loving seeing this because America is learning what is going on. And then that naturally leads to, what do we need to do to stop this? And that's what we're trying to accomplish with the commission.
Again, for those of you watching on computer right now, you might be able to see the pictures. Not real easy, but you can see there's a president, and then there's Shay. And
he's not that tall. He's standing on a big stool.
But anyway, this one I just thought would be kind of fun because I just happened to bring that in, and I thought it applied very much to what is happening there. And so just some really good stories. I'm looking at the clock. We only have a certain amount of time, and I always like to end with some prayer targets. One, obviously, is, of course, the case before the Supreme Court, because we certainly want to get that decision to come down. But you have another case which we might mention that you're hoping the Supreme Court might take.
Yeah, in addition to Gabe Olivier, which we just argued, and be praying for that case, we've got a case that is sitting at the court that they're about to decide whether they take. And it is a really big case because, as many people know, a number of states have decided they're going to take away religious exemptions from vaccine mandates. Well, we've always had those in the country because there's always religious beliefs of people who can't do vaccination. And it's a small percentage, but it's out there. Well, New York and California and some of these places said, no religious exemptions anymore after all these years. And so what we're dealing with is in New York is the state of New York is saying, we are coming into your Amish community and we're going to force you to vaccinate your children. And the Amish, of course, are going, no, you're not. I mean, they're a separatist group for a reason because they're trying to be separate and they don't believe in that. And of course, it's New York. So they lost to the district court, lost the Court of Appeals. We're now at the Supreme Court. I think this is the perfect case to take to bring this issue up. And it will affect so many people of faith in the country. They're right, really, in every situation in the future. When the government is trying to force something into their body, where if they have a religious reason or religious objection, their faith will win out and not government power to inject things into your body. It's a really incredible opportunity for people and for freedom. And I just be in prayer that the court will take this because I think it would be really one of the more significant cases in our lifetime.
And again, I would just think, Erin, these are the kinds of prayer targets we encourage because as important as it is to make the case before the courts, I think it is really important for us to be praying for you guys that are involved in these very important cases.
Yeah, I mean, we at First Liberty really do covet your prayers. Those are very, very special to us. And we get to stand up and do what we do because the Lord allows it to happen. And the Lord is entrusting us with those opportunities. And your prayers go a long way. The fact that our supporters are willing to go before the throne of God and ask on our behalf for certain things, it makes a difference. We know that God hears the prayer of a righteous man. And so we are so thankful for people that are willing to take the time to pray because it really does. Prayer changes things, and we believe that. So we're very, very grateful.
Again, we have a link to First Liberty. Get that insider and get the Friday updates and those kinds of things. Just about out of time. Let me just mention that next week we have George Barna on. Going to be talking about some very interesting surveys there. Paul Baraka has been with us before. Will be on there as well. And I know we have a particular I guess it is a next generation roundtable that's taking place. And so I'm not sure I'm going to see either of you until Christmas. So I'll wish you a Merry Christmas. But thank you both for being in here today. Absolutely. Let me also thank Doug, who stepped stepping in for Megan, engineering the program. Steve, thank you for producing the program. And don't forget that all the articles we've mentioned today are on the website at pointofview.net. We're going to change out the take action item. We're going to change out the video. Of course, we have 2 different video pieces there as well, and some viewpoints commentary. So visit pointofview.net, because by next Monday, it's going to be different again. So enjoy the weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday right here on Point of View.
Many years ago, they began saying that we live in the information age. Well, today there is so much information coming at us from every direction. The hardest thing is to discern which issues are really important and how can I make a positive impact without wasting my time trying to figure out accurate information. Let me give you a suggestion to help with that. Visit pointofview.net. Look at the tabs across the top. Find the one named Viewpoints. Kerby Anderson and others on our team are constantly watching for news to identify those issues that you really need to know about. They boil things down in a brief summary, and then you can decide if it's something on which you want to learn more and get involved. Again, when you go to pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints, you'll see exactly what I mean. You'll see the issues that we are covering right now. And when you like what you see, I honestly think you will, you can slide on over, enter your email, and get them automatically sent to your inbox each day. That's it. Take a minute now, be informed. Pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.